What are you doing?
Trying to figure out who iPhone is. Now I know.
Surprise!
Yeah, now I know. So I'll
It,
just put it on there.
it doesn't have Colette and Ed on there.
No, it just said iPhone.
Ah,
And so I changed it over to Ed and Colette.
you got one L in there.
I got one L.
Good job. Good job.
Yeah, you got one L of a name.
Yeah, I sure do. Hey, got any updates on Debbie?
Uh yeah. But you'll have to talk to Pat about that because she told me that something that early this morning. I don't know if she got any other updates or anything like that, but it said that she had some like pneumonia in her left lung or
Oh no.
something like that. I don't know. It just seems like one thing after another with them. So
Golly.
it's just
And what about Martha? You everything okay still with her?
yeah, she's just that uh the doctor says, well, we don't want to do the surgery until such time as we can give you a stress test and see how your heart's doing or something. Check on her heart, make sure that she's strong enough for the surgery. And so the surgery's been postponed now
Oh,
for a little
okay.
bit. So and that's good too. So
Yeah, we're praying hard for them.
yeah, yeah. So but that's all in and let's see. I see Leonard and Karen Reaper on, and they Leonard said he's pretty much over his cold, and Karen seems like she's still on the uphill slide there. So hopefully in a day or two she'll start getting over all of that crud. So
Oh yeah, golly, God bless them. I hope I don't get all that stuff,
I'm,
guys.
t- I'm telling you, I could not breathe, period, hardly out of my lungs, much less my total nose was so stopped up it wouldn't breathe. It seems like it gets worse every year.
well, I know you don't like peppers, but those hot peppers will get your nose running and your feet smelling, man.
Well, I hate running after my nose after it starts running.
Leonard, that
Well,
doesn't sound good that you can't breathe.
I know.
I know. He says, God.
Well, I tell you what, every time I start working on those hot peppers of mine, chopping them up or once they're freeze dried and then put them in the blender and turn them into powder, that stuff gets my nose going, and then that's good. And then when I get to the dinner table and I sprinkle some of that death dust on whatever it is I'm eating, that clears out my sinuses again. So. That pretty well cleans it all up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but it gets worse every year. I'm thinking I got to try something different. Maybe hot powder is what I need or something. Who knows?
Yeah.
How
You know
about
what? I had
how
a I
about
had a pretty
how
good.
about wait. How about not waiting so long when you're sick before you try to do something about it? That's just a little something from your sister. Okay. Now,
Yeah,
now I'll stop.
that's true. I shouldn't wait so long.
Well, for congested nose, I had that 2 or 3, 4 years ago. I don't know, whatever it was. And I bought one of those deals they called a Navage. It's
Yeah,
one
I've
of
heard of
those.
it.
Um, and it runs salt water up through your sinuses and stuff, and it takes a little bit of getting used to. I have to admit that, but it really does clean out your sinuses and get you breathing again. It just cleans it all out, and it's not it's. but it does take a little bit of getting used to try to figure out how to run that thing. Because what it does, it shoots salt water up one nostril and then sucks it out the other nostril, and it sounds gross, and it is, but it it kind of sort of works. So
Yeah, I'm
anyway,
gonna have to give that one a try.
yeah, navage. All right, so I think, well, it's 7:03, and I think we're about to need to get going here because I got lots of words and a little bit of time. So I'm going to go ahead and change the view here, and
Already turned it off?
Uh,
I turned it off.
okay.
yeah, no, I don't.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody here.
Where's your remote?
And it's supposed to get me back to the speaker and not the. Okay, can everybody see my screen, the shared screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Well, and there we go. Okay, got the right buttons pushed here. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll begin with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commandments and commands us to engross ourselves in words of Torah. All right, so here we are in chapter 8 tonight. And for any new people that are just picking this up on YouTube, um, my name is Steve Sheik. I'm the congregation leader at Tree of Life Messianic Congregation in Houston. Actually, it's in Katy, Texas, which is on the west side of Houston. And so there you have it. So here's our little timeline that we all have just to figure out, okay, where Zechariah is, or if you wanted to say it in Hebrew, it's Zechariah. But I think that's the last one. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right into it because we don't have much time. Then the word of Adonai Svaot came, saying, okay, this one one little verse. All right, in this whole chapter 8, there's like two major messages, but like 10 minor messages that make up the one, and each makes up the chapter, and each one of these little messages starts out by saying that the Adonai Svaot says such and such, and that's why you'll see in the if you happen to pick up the slides tonight and looked at them, you'll see how I've numbered each one of those things. And so in this first verse, though, he's just not saying that, Adonai said to me, he said just, thus says Adonai Svaot. And so that kind of tells me that possibly what he's doing is just saying, okay, here's a compilation of things that the Lord has said. And in no particular, if you look at them, they're not totally connected. They're not disjointed, but they're not totally connected either. So it says, "Thus says Adonai Svaot, I am exceedingly zealous for Zion. I am burning with jealousy for her." Okay, so what is that saying? Okay, God's what is the zealousness? Okay, it's God's passionate love for Zion, for Jerusalem, and it's like a deep, zealous commitment to His people and to His holy city. And this jealousy, though, it's not like envy or anything like that. It's a jealousy that reflects God's protective covenant zeal, just a consuming passion to guard his people from idolatry and harm, kind of like a parent would be with a child, just always taking care and never let especially if you're a mama grizzly, never letting anyone your child come to harm from anything or anybody. And so that's the kind of zealous jealousy that is on display here. And the other side of this zealousness is that it has uh, shows God's righteous anger against anything that threatens or corrupts Zion. And again, like a parent would be, that you would get really upset if someone was bullying your child. And so that's how God says this. He's zealous over Zion. And so here in this chapter, we see a series of this particular verse introduces a series of promises of restoration, peace, blessing for Jerusalem after the exile. And so God's zeal for Jerusalem and for Zion is the foundation for the coming renewal of Israel. So, verse 3 says, "Thus says Adonai, I will return to Zion and dwell in the midst of Jerusalem. Then Jerusalem will be called the city of truth, and the mountain of Adonai Svaot will be called the holy mountain." Okay, so um, this talks about God's return to Zion. After the exile, God promises that he's going to return and he's going to dwell among his people. You remember in the book of Ezekiel, where he's looking at the temple, and the Spirit of God, actually he sees the Spirit of God get up and leave the temple, and just there is no more Spirit of God in the holy temple or in the holy place. And this is, of course, before the fall of Jerusalem in 586 BCE. But that that part in Ezekiel just illustrates how that God got up and he left. He went away from Jerusalem and from all of the things that these guys were doing. So, but earlier in Zechariah chapter 2 and verse 10 to 11, he says he's going to come back to Jerusalem. And so his dwelling in Jerusalem signifies a restored covenant relationship and divine favor. And so when he talks about the city of truth, that means that that's a place where God's truth is known, lived, and upheld. It also reflects God's character of truth and nothing false about him. And so this is in contrast then um, to the Jerusalem's past of corruption and falsehood. So this is a complete turnaround, what we call a teshuvah, or total turnaround. So the holy mountain, Mount Zion, where the temple stood, is called holy because of God's presence and the purity of worship. Now, the holiness is not merely a ritual, set aside, but it's a moral and a spiritual holiness that again reflects God's sanctifying work among his people. And so, if you ever read some of these old theologians and commentators, Adam Clarke was one from, I think, 1700s, 1800s, sometime. He was a long time before I was born. And he noted that Jerusalem was once false and unholy and a profligate, but it will be rebuilt as a city of truth and holiness. So um, there, it's going to be something that is completely transformative and changes the lives of the people that are there, and they will then become what they were supposed to be. That it was a people of priests and kings, and they were so supposed to let their light shine and shine the light of God on all of the world, and that's kind of what he's reflecting here. That holy mountain is holy because God is back on the in Jerusalem, dwelling in Jerusalem, and that's where Yeshua is going to be ruling and reigning from this new temple that will be built in Jerusalem, and his throne room will be the Holy of Holies. So, kind of in summary for this chapter, it's a promise of God's renewed presence in Jerusalem, and He's going to transform it into a place of truth and holiness. Now, this hopefully will reassure Israel of restoration after the exile, but it then also points to a greater fulfillment of concerning the Messiah, the coming Messiah, and his body of believers. And so I think this whole chapter kind of points in that direction. You'll see in the notes where I've kind of pointed that direction and pointed out that okay, this points to the millennial age or the messianic age, as it were. I say millennial age because sometimes when you say messianic age, that there are people who say, okay, well that's the church age, when the Messiah's already come and he's this is his the 2,000 years. That's where he's building up his church or his body. And so I use millennial age mostly because then that points to the time when Yeshua returns to the earth and sets up his millennial reign, the 1,000-year reign from Jerusalem. So going ahead in verses 4 and 5. Thus says Adonai Sabaoth, once again, old men and old women will sit in the streets of Jerusalem, each with his staff in his hand because of his age. The streets of the city will be full of boys and girls playing in its streets. All right, so I think this is, kind of a self-explanatory of a couple of verses here. So, the presence of elderly men and women sitting peacefully in the streets signifies stability and longevity, kind of like um, you see these old pictures of people sitting around and sitting on benches outside the courthouse or in the old around the city square where they're just sitting there and it's peaceful. One of the places that we drive through to Columbus, the city that we're near, we drive by this housing. I don't know. I hate to say project, or it's a nursing home slant housing and so forth for old people, and they congregate up there right by the street, and they got benches there, and you'll drive by there, and there's all these people with they got their walkers or their canes or whatever, and they're just sitting around chit-chatting. And so that's kind of the picture we are, because it's peaceful for them. They don't have to worry about being mugged there, and some parts of the United States, you wouldn't dare do something like that. But anyway, that's the thought that they're doing. And then in times of war or instability, the vulnerable. Who are the most vulnerable? Well, the elderly and children. And they're the ones that suffer the most. And so their peaceful presence here shows that Jerusalem will be safe, free from fear, and it'll be a flourishing, thriving city. And the staff in their hand reflects their advanced age, like they got their walkers, but also dignity and rest, no longer hurried or threatened. And the children, of course, that represents vitality and innocence and joy and just like like in our congregation, their tree of life, where the kids come bouncing up there for the blessing, and they always say, "Yeah, Rabbi's favorite part," and that's exactly right, because I love to see these kids come up there and their innocence in some cases, or their wonderment, and some of them, I go up there and they look over at me with, they'll cut their eyes at me like, I don't know, so that when they catch my eye, that's it's a high point for them, especially then when I acknowledge them and kind of wave to them or wink at them or something. Then they're all happy, and so that's kind of the picture that we see here. And in ancient cities, well, shoot, even today, like I said, there are places in this United States where if I lived there, I would not let my children go out and play on the streets of, or in the front yard. They would have to be in a place where I could watch them, and they would be free from somebody just walking by. And so this image then just shows a community that's thriving across the generation, the whole spectrum of the generations, both the old and the young, enjoying life together. And so it's also a picture of returning to Torah and to the covenant, where Deuteronomy 28:11 promises long life and prosperity. And so this contrasts sharply with the exile, the desolation that was of the exile, where Jerusalem streets were just empty, and in fact the countryside was empty for the most part. And so this whole restoration of Jerusalem will be holistic. It'll be a spiritual renewal, social stability, and just a generational flourishing. And so this also is a messianic foreshadowing that when in the millennial age, when the Messiah is ruling and reigning, that even those parts of the world where it's dangerous today will not be under the Messiah's rule and reign. So this just shows God as a restorer, and his promises of generational continuity, and that there's hope at the end of the tunnel there, that God's presence there brings peace, and true security does not come from walls or armies, but from God dwelling in the middle of his people. All right, so so in summary, these two verses then they portray a restored Jerusalem where the elderly enjoy long life and children play safely in the streets. It's a picture of covenantal blessing, communal peace, and messianic hope. God's presence transforming the city into a place of joy and security for all generations. Any comments or questions before we go on? Okay, verse 6. Thus says Adonai Svaot, it may seem difficult in the eyes of the remnant of the people in those days, but will it also be difficult in my eyes? It is a declaration of Adonai. So what we have here is, are we looking through human eyes, or are we looking through God's eyes? So the remnant that is there, remember there's only like 20% of the population came back out of Babylon. And so they come back, and the task just seems so impossible for them to rebuild the walls, rebuild the city, rebuild the temple. And they had small numbers and limited resources and hostile neighbors, and so it was just it seemed like it was just too difficult for them, and um, then I think part of what God was trying to say here is that, okay, with people, with humans, okay, you got limited ability. There's not gonna, you can't do it on your own, but with God, it's anything is possible, and what seems impossible to man, um, is nothing to God. He just it's just so simple and easy for him, and so this sentiment, you'll see that in other places like in Genesis 18:14 is where God says, "Is anything too hard for the Lord?" And then in Jeremiah 32 he says, "Behold, I am the Lord. Is anything too hard for me?" So here he is. He's encouraging. I didn't ever flip that. He's encouraging the people and reassuring them that their weakness does not limit God's power, and restoration does not depend on human strength, but on God's covenant faithfulness. So here we have the vision. What are they looking at? Are they looking through their own eyes? Like, remember when the Israelites came out of Canaan, when they were spying the land, and it says they are giants and they look at us like grasshoppers, and we also look like grasshoppers in their eye, in our eyes. And but God says, don't look with those human glasses. Put on your godly glasses so that you can see what is possible. And in the New Testament it says, with God all things are possible. I can do anything through the Messiah who strengthens me. And so it's again, I think this is an encouragement for the people of Jerusalem at that point, and it's also an encouragement to us today. So this verse, it confronts the doubts of the weary remnant, the people that are there, and they're working real hard trying to get the temple built and the walls built, their houses built, and it just seems almost impossible. But God says, no, it's possible. You're doing good, and it's going to get better. And he said, remember that other verse, not by might or not by power, but my spirit, says the Lord. And so God is reassuring the people that his promises, whether it's to rebuild Jerusalem or bringing the Messiah to them, it's surely going to come to pass, because nothing is too impossible for God. All right, next verse. Thus says Adonai Svaot. Again, we're starting out with that same phrase. Thus says Adonai Svaot. Behold, I will save my people from the land of the east and from the land of the west. I will bring them back, and they will live in the midst of Jerusalem. They will be my people, and I will be their God in truth and righteousness. So, in context, Zechariah is speaking to the Jews who had returned from Babylonian exile. Jerusalem was being rebuilt, but it was taking a long time and a lot of work, and morale was low, and many of them kind of doubted God's promises. But what does he say? He says that he talks about the east and the west, these directions. I've talked about, where he said it cast our sins as far as the east is from the west. Well, now he said, okay, from the east to the west, the farthest reaches of the world, I'm bringing people back to the land, and I will bring people back. And of course, it didn't really all happen there in Zechariah's time, but it will happen in the millennial period. And so. Here he says, and your people will be my people, and I will be their God, or they shall be my people, and I will be their God. That if you remember that goes back to like Exodus, Leviticus, and Jeremiah um, basically that it reassures Israel that despite any exile, God's covenant remains intact. Israel might have broken the covenant, but God never did. So um, this just again points to the fact that it's God Himself. He's the one that will bring about their salvation. And as far as the east is from the west, and later on in Isaiah talks about he's going to expand this to the north and the south, points to a worldwide ingathering of the people back to the land. Even Yeshua talked about that in John 10:16. It talks about gathering his sheep from all the nations. And so this promise gathering is, of regathering, we see that fulfilled in Yeshua, who's through his sacrifice, through his blood, they are uniting the Jew and the Gentile into one flock. Okay. And so we see that Israel or Jerusalem, I mean, it's historically referring to a physical city, but Jerusalem also uh, points to the New Jerusalem where God dwells with his people eternally. So the practical application of this was that, for these communities that are feeling fragmented or displaced, and this passage reassures that God's plan is restoration and unity. He's going to bring everything back together. Just hang in there. It's going to be all right. And so, we can rest in that same covenant promise that God took care of his people then. He's going to take care of his people now. We don't have to worry about it. So these promises that he's given them, though, does require that we live in truth and righteousness, that you pursue those kinds of things. All right. So comments or questions anybody might have here?
I have one.
Rudy.
Um, when I read that, it kind of reminds me of the Exodus in Egypt, and it seems like because he says, "I will bring them, back." So it almost seems like it's going to be something that we're going to be like, "Wow, yeah, nobody else could have brought them back, but him himself."
Exactly. It is strictly a divine intervention that brings this all about, because just like in Egypt, that gaggle of slaves would never have been able to overcome Pharaoh's armies and get out of Dodge like they did, and then also to defeat their army. And that's why God did it with parting of the sea. The army of Pharaoh went into the sea, and then God just baptized them all and eliminated the threat to Israel. And so yeah, that totally divine intervention is what is called for here, and it's what God is talking about there. So um, any other comments or questions? Okay. Verses 9 to 13, then. Thus says Adonai Svaot, let your hands be strong, you who hear these words spoken by the prophets who were there the day the foundation of the house of Adonai Svaot was laid, so that the temple may be rebuilt. Before those days there were no wages for man or animal, nor was there any shalom from adversity for those who came or went, because I set every one against his neighbor. But now I will not treat the remnant of his people as in the former days. It is a declaration of Adonai. For there will be sowing of shalom. The vine will yield its fruit, the ground will produce its increase, and the heavens will give their due. I will cause the remnant of this people to inherit all these things. It will happen that just as you were a curse among the nations, house of Judah and house of Israel, so will I save you, and you will be a blessing. Fear not, let your hands be strong. So, this we see here. This is a turning point. These verses here, 9 to 13, it's a turning point where God urges these returned exiles to be strong in the rebuilding of the temple. And he promises that their former hardships will give way to peace and prosperity and blessing. Now these verses they follow God's promises in Zechariah 8, the earlier in the chapter, that he's going to dwell in Jerusalem and restore his people. Now the focus shifts from the distant future to the immediate task at hand, rebuilding the temple and living faithfully in covenant relationship. So we've kind of drawn back this long range messianic focus, and then now we're back to, okay, what about today? And he's telling them, so let your hands be strong. And he's it's a call to courage and perseverance, and this is kind of like when Joshua was taken over and leading the people into Canaan for the first time, where he's saying, be strong, let us be strengthened. And what we're talking about here is physical strength. A lot of times people want to spiritualize things, but here we're talking about both physical strength for rebuilding the temple, and spiritual strength for the determination and the faith to do these things and not be fearful or not give up because it's too hard. And then in these verses 10 to 12, he says, before there were no wages, no safety, neighbors against neighbor. And so what did they have? They had famine and insecurity and strife. That was what was going on in Jerusalem before their fall. And that was also what was going on in Samaria 100 years earlier in their fall. There was just the haves had it and the have-nots didn't, and the haves kept trying to take whatever the have-nots didn't have, and so it was, every man against himself is a tough time to live in those in Samaria and the northern tribes, or in Judah, in Jerusalem. So, but now the contrast is that God promises, instead of all of that strife and trouble and death, that he's going to be sowing peace, and there'll be fruitful vines and productive land and heavenly dew. He's going to send in the heavy dew, or the rain, in its season, so that again their crops will produce well. And so this throws back to Deuteronomy 28, where God is saying, if you will obey my covenant and obey my commandments, then I will send the rain in its season and the dew that you need for these crops. I will bless the land. And so it's quite a contrast there from before and then afterwards. And so previously, Jerusalem, or Judah and Israel, had been a byword of cursing among the nations, and they were seen as being cursed and defeated. And What do we see today? There's so many people that say, well, it's all the Jews' fault. All of this trouble that we have, it's the Jews' fault. The Jews run Washington. The Jews run Hollywood, and the Jews run the world government, the WHO, the UN, and so forth. It's all the Jews' fault, and you can hear that all over the place. Sometimes stated very just out there, stated just like that, and other times it's much more subtle than that. But it's Jewish people walk around with a target on their back, and so the Lord says, okay, but you know what? I'm going to change that around to make you a blessing, like He had said to Abraham. You're going to be a blessing to all of the families of the earth. And so, He just says, fear not, be strong, let your hands be strong. And so, just chazak. And so that's what these verses. Now, I guess what's significant here is that um, the rebuilding of the temple was not just about architecture. It symbolized God's presence and the restoration of worship. And so I think these verses also, they look forward to that messianic or that millennial age where peace and fruitfulness and blessing will flow from God's dwelling among His people. And so it's going to be quite a change, quite a thing to see in the millennial period. And while I'm not saying, okay, I want to die right now and then or whatever, that it's just so that I can see the millennial period. It'll come. It's going to be coming someday, and when it does, it's going to be great. And so, but these verses here, they encourage us to persevere in whatever it is that we're doing in rebuilding, and believers today are encouraged to remain strong and steadfast in God's work, whatever it is that God calls you to do, despite any kind of opposition or discouragement. And one of the things is that past failures or hardships do not define the future. Whatever is in the past is in the past. You don't have to keep dredging it up and getting yourself all sloppy with the stupid things that you did in the past. Goodness knows, all of us have done that kind of stuff. Leave it there. You've been saved. The Lord has saved you. Then leave all of that slop behind you and keep on going and be strong. And so God's blessings, His promise of blessings, transforms all of that despair into hope. And so, God's people are meant to be a blessing. And so here it's reversing that world's perception that the Jews are responsible for all of the bad things in the world, to now it's going to be, okay, yeah, the Jews are responsible for all the good things that are going on in the world. It's going to be quite the change that God is saying here, that He's telling His remnant that my favor on you has returned, but your task is to build, be strong, and trust in His promises. And then the passage moves from curse to blessing, from famine to fruitfulness, and from fear to courage. It's a timeless reminder that God's presence brings restoration and hope. Okay? Comments or questions? We're buzzing right through this stuff. All right. Verses 14 to 18. For thus says Adonai Svaot, just as I determined to harm you when your fathers provoked me to anger, says Adonai Svaot, I did not relent, So I have again determined in these days to do good to Jerusalem and to the house of Judah. Fear not. These are the things that you are to do. Speak the truth one to another. Administer the judgment of truth and shalom in your gates. Do not let any of you devise evil in your hearts against your neighbor, and do not love false oaths. For I hate all these things. It is a declaration of Adonai. Again, the word of Adonai came saying, and then we'll go on to the next verses in a minute. All right, so these verses, they emphasize God's shift from judgment to blessing, and he's urging his people to live truthfully, peacefully, righteously. And so it does, recall or brings back to memory the past punishment that Israel and Judah had. Why? Because their forefathers, their ancestors broke covenant with God. They were disobedient, they were defiant, and all those different things. So, but now the Lord is promising restoration, and but He does outline, ethical commands that reflect covenantal faithfulness. He's telling them, get back to Torah, is what he's saying now. He says that he reminded them that once he punished them because of their father's rebellion, and this punishment was not haphazard. It was deliberate, it was unrelenting, and it showed showed his judgment. All he was doing is following the contract, the covenant that the children of Israel agreed to at Mount Sinai. They said, yes, we will do all of those things. And yet then they didn't. And so now he said, if you don't do the things that I tell you, if you don't follow my commandments, then you're going to be cursed. And it's I guess in today's world we might say there'll be hell to pay if you don't follow God's rules. And so that's what happened to them. But now, just as he had determined that he was going to punish them for their wrongdoing, now he said, okay, I'm going to restore you because you've paid your dues. You've been to Babylon. You've been in the exile for 70 years. And somewhere in there, God saw a different spirit in the people, because now he was willing to purpose in his own heart that he was going to do good for Jerusalem and Judah. And just as his judgment was, certain, and it was sure, and it was, not to be overturned, his blessings are also equally assured that's not going to change. He said, I'm going to bless you. He will bless you. And so he's just telling them, fear not. And it's a call to trust in his renewed favor. But with this restoration, it's not only the material things, where they're gonna have a better life and peace, this, that, and the other, but it's also a moral restoration. And in this, God required his people to speak the truth to one another, render good, just judgments. Remember in Deuteronomy, or in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, where he says, "What do I require? I require justice." And so he said, require these render judgments that are going to promote peace and tranquility and good neighbors with each other. And he says, then reject evil schemes against neighbors. So you don't go plotting against your neighbor so that you can, change the boundary markers or something, which is strictly forbidden. Or cheat your neighbor out of their real estate or their sheep or their cattle or whatever it is. You don't do these things against your neighbors. Then it says, avoid false oaths. Be truthful. And so again, this goes back to covenant in the Ten Commandments, where it says you don't tell lies. And so here he is again, reminding them of what they need to do, and he closes this with a real strong declaration. It says all those things that I talked about there that you should not do. Well, he says all those things I hate, and that underscores God's moral character. He delights in truth and peace, but he abhors deceit and injustice, lying and cheating and stealing, all of those things. So then we have the transition to this next verse, and it goes into Zechariah 19. All right. Uh, so thus says Adonai Svaot, the fast of the 4th, the fast of the 5th, the fast of the 7th, and the fast of the 10th month will become joy, gladness, and cheerful Moedim. Therefore, love truth and shalom. All right. So what do we have here? Um, the We're seeing here that he's teaching that these fasts of mourning. Let me change my screen. The fast of mourning will be transformed into feasts of joy, but the people must embrace that new lifestyle of truth and peace for this blessing to endure. And when he talks about the 4 fasts that he's talking about here that they observed while they were in Babylonian exile, the 4th month commemorated the breach of Jerusalem's walls. Now we covered this earlier on in this book, but I'm just reiterating them so that you'll remember them. The 5th month, it's the remembered the destruction of the temple, in the 9th of Av in 586 BCE. And then the 7th month marked the assassination of Gedaliah, the governor of Judah, which brought horrible repercussions on the people. And so that's why that again was a time of mourning. The 10th month, that was the beginning of the Babylonian siege by Nebuchadnezzar. And so these were days of grief and lament and just a national humiliation. But God says, okay, I'm going to transform all that mourning into joy so that these fasts will become festivals of joy, gladness, and cheerful feasts. And so this also reflects that restoration and renewal that the calamities, the disasters that once defined Israel's memory would now be replaced by celebrations of God's mercy and his deliverance. And so it's a classic prophetic picture of redemption where sorrow is turned into rejoicing. And so you find those themes in Jeremiah 31 and Psalm 30. So but again, there is a condition. This verse ends with the command, therefore love truth and peace. And so this outward celebration and of joy and so forth must be matched by inner integrity, truth, honesty in dealings, faithfulness to God's covenant, and rejection of falsehood, and peace, reconciliation, unity, and justice within the community. All of those things, those are supposed to, God is calling the people to do all of those things. So, without those virtues of truth and peace, then all of these feasts and all that they come at a risk of being just empty rituals. And God wants transformed hearts and not transformed calendars. So God for Israel here, he promised that to reassure you. He said to the post-exilic community, those that came back from the exile, that their mourning was not permanent, that restoration was possible if they lived faithfully. Now, and so a lot of people will see in this a foreshadowing of the gospel where the Messiah transforms mourning into joy and calls his people to live again in truth and peace. You find that in John 14:27 and Galatians 5:22. So, what are the takeaways of this? Traditional or rituals and traditions gain meaning only when they cultivate truthfulness and peace in daily life, and only when you're living that life, that spiritual life. Um, Again, these verses here, they're a turning point. Fasts of sorrow become feasts of joy, and the transformation, though, warning here, it's not automatic. It requires the community to be committed to truth and peace. So, in many ways, this verse reminds us that God's restoration is both a gift to us and a calling. Joy flourishes when righteousness and reconciliation are embraced. So, verses 20 to 22, we're almost there. Thus says Adonai Svaot, peoples and the inhabitants of many cities will again come. The inhabitants of one city will go to another, saying, let us go to entreat the favor of Adonai and to seek Adonai Svaot. I also am going. Indeed, many peoples and powerful nations will come to seek Adonai Svaot in Jerusalem and to entreat the favor of Adonai. So here we have now uh, the ninth little message that God is giving Zechariah, and that is he's giving him a glimpse of the future when the nations are going to be coming to Jerusalem to ask the Lord for his favor and knowledge and wisdom and just how to make their lives better. And so while it points to the present age of Israel at that point and Judah at that point, it also will more broadly point to again the millennial reign, the messianic age, when the nations will be coming to Jerusalem during Sukkot. Once a year, they have to come to Jerusalem. That's during Sukkot and bring their offerings to the Lord and worship the Lord there. If they don't, then their nation will suffer economic collapse for the next year. The Bible says that it won't rain on their nation for a year. Well, that just means that they will have an economic collapse if they don't come um, and praise the Lord and worship the Lord. So in these verses here, 20, it says, peoples and inhabitants of many lands will come together and they'll recognize Jerusalem as a place of divine favor. And in 21, they encourage one another and says, let's go speedily, or let's get going really quickly to pray before the Lord. And so this shows a real turnaround in world attitudes, where right now people are seeking to destroy Israel. Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran and most of the Muslim world want to see Jerusalem and all the Jews annihilated. People in this country are calling for the same thing. And so compare that to what God is saying. No, in the future, it's going to be right the opposite, that people are coming in a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, and they will be drawn there for many reasons, but they will understand that, okay, this is where God is. And I don't believe that there's going to be any atheists that come to Jerusalem just to go through the motions. No, they're coming to Jerusalem because they know that there is a God, and so. We've seen a little bit of this already in right after Yeshua's ascension, where the day of Pentecost, and people from all over the world, they had gathered in Jerusalem, and so ultimately what that did was just that expanded the reach of the gospel all over the place, and so the people they're wanting to. Well, it goes on again here in another minute or two. I'll get to where it says that the nations recognize that God is with you. So remember, God told the nations He wanted them to be a light to the world, and it also tells us that God's plan is not limited to just the Jews, but it's all the nations. Every nation in the world is invited to seek the Lord. Every person, no matter who it is and who you are, God is calling us to come to Him. So it's going to be quite the thing to watch and to see, when those days come. So these verses are a vision of restoration and expansion, where Jerusalem basically becomes the center of worldwide worship, and well, basically, it's going to be the capital of the world. So, final verse. Thus says Adonai Svaot, in those days it will come to pass that 10 men from every language and of the nations will grasp the corner of the garment of the Jews, saying, let us go with you, for we have heard that God is with you. All right, so in this case here, that 10 men. Now, where have we seen that 10 men thing? Well, we saw that where Abraham was talking to the Lord about destroying Sodom, and he says, if there's only just 10 people there, would you destroy it? And he said, no, I wouldn't. And then, of course, 10 is the number of a minyan. You have to have 10 people before you can do certain prayers and so forth corporately under mainstream Judaism. We don't follow that in Messianic Judaism, because a lot of Messianic congregations don't have 10 men. So it's but that's where that is. It just means that a lot of people will come, and it's not a hard number. It doesn't mean just 10. It means a lot of people will be coming to recognize the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and so that the world wants they want to come to the Lord, and they want to be kind of like Jewish. You saw the same thing after in the book of Esther, where they were allowed to defend themselves, and Haman was killed, and so forth. And it says people were coming to the Jews and says, let us convert to Judaism. And the Bible says, because they were afraid of the Jews. And so what this is going to do, though, it is going to lift that stigma of that we see in the world in Judaism today. Just look back to the propaganda of Nazi Germany, and some of the horrible pictures, caricatures that they have of Jewish people, as just with the big nose and the evil look and so forth. Well, God's going to remove all of that stigma, and people are going to in the future want to be just like their Jewish neighbors. So anyway, that is the end of the lesson tonight. And so are there any other comments or questions that anyone might have? So, wow, I talked you all out, didn't I? Okay. Well, in that case, then I'm going to close the. I'll stop the share so we can take this stuff and stop the live stream.